Power does not emerge from mere desire, nor from the empty proclamation of ambition, but from the deliberate acceptance of responsibility. To be responsible is to shoulder a weight willingly, to say to oneself, "I will carry the burden that others fear to lift." Nations rise on this principle just as individuals do, and they falter when they attempt to abandon it. Weapons, technologies, and strategies are not sudden miracles. They are crystallizations of decades of responsibility borne by countless minds and hands. A nation that is disciplined enough to generate such power signals to the world that it has endured sacrifice. Sacrifice, after all, is the currency of progress. Every engineer who works late, every soldier who trains, every policymaker who thinks carefully about the future, they are paying the cost. Responsibility generates power because it refines character, and character creates capability. Without responsibility, there is only weakness disguised as freedom. We tend to think of strength as an external phenomenon, something material, visible, and measurable. But strength begins invisibly, deep inside the individual soul, with the willingness to confront difficulty. A society that ignores responsibility invites decay, for chaos thrives in its absence. When a person refuses to grow up, when a family refuses to discipline its children, when a nation refuses to hold itself accountable, the seeds of collapse are sown. Conversely, when responsibility is embraced, order emerges. That order produces stability, and stability allows for the accumulation of knowledge and progress. The weapons that stun the world did not materialize overnight. They are the consequence of generations cultivating order. They are symbols of what happens when responsibility is accepted rather than evaded. A weapon, paradoxically, is less about destruction and more about discipline. Its creation requires stability, consistency, and vision sustained across time. Responsibility makes that possible. Think of your own life in the same terms. You cannot produce strength unless you decide to shoulder responsibility voluntarily. The alternative is resentment and weakness, because life will impose chaos regardless of your preferences. When you stand upright with your shoulders back, as I often say, you signal to the world and to yourself that you are prepared to bear its weight. That is the origin of real power. India, by accepting responsibility for its own security, for its technological development, for its sovereignty, demonstrated to the world that it would not outsource its future. That is why its actions stunned others. It was the manifestation of responsibility accepted on a civilizational scale. This principle scales from the individual to the family to the nation. The secret map of weapons is therefore also a map of responsibility distributed across millions who refused to collapse into victimhood. Responsibility generates resilience, and resilience inevitably generates power. Responsibility always demands sacrifice. You cannot build strength without giving something up. Because resources are finite and effort has to be directed, a person who chooses to study instead of indulging in constant distraction sacrifices immediate pleasure for future competence. A nation that chooses to invest in defense rather than frivolous indulgence sacrifices comfort for survival. Sacrifice is therefore not merely loss, it is transformation. It transforms weakness into capability, chaos into order, and fragility into resilience. The secret map, then, is not only a map of weapons, but a map of sacrifices layered over time. Every project completed, every obstacle endured, every hour of discipline, it all accumulates invisibly until it suddenly emerges as power that shocks the world. Responsibility transforms potential into reality through the alchemy of sacrifice. Without it, nations and individuals alike are destined to remain fragile, unprepared, and vulnerable. You might ask why responsibility is so frightening, and the answer is simple. It requires you to confront suffering willingly. Life itself is composed of suffering, tragedy, and limitation. The human temptation is always to flee from it, to pretend it is not there, to mask it with distractions. But fleeing responsibility only magnifies the suffering, because it leaves you unarmed before chaos. When a nation chooses to ignore its vulnerabilities, to refuse the duty of preparation, it invites disaster. When an individual avoids responsibility for health, finances, or relationships, the same disaster emerges at a personal scale. But when suffering is confronted directly, voluntarily, something extraordinary happens. It produces dignity, competence, and strength. That is the paradox. The very thing you fear is the thing that gives you the tools to overcome fear. Responsibility transforms suffering into resilience, and resilience into power. In a strange way, responsibility is the path to freedom. People often think that to be free is to do whatever one wishes, unbound by duties or constraints. But that is not freedom. That is chaos disguised as liberty. True freedom is the ability to act effectively in the world, and that requires competence. Competence is purchased only through responsibility. Imagine a person who wants to play the piano beautifully. If he refuses the responsibility of practice, he will never gain the freedom to play. But if he accepts the discipline of daily effort, he achieves mastery, and mastery is freedom. The same is true for nations. By accepting the responsibility of discipline and preparation, they achieve sovereignty. Sovereignty is freedom at the highest level. That is why responsibility is the source of true power, both for individuals and civilizations. Without it, no one is free, neither person nor country. There is also an ethical dimension to responsibility. When you accept responsibility, you do not merely make yourself strong, you make yourself trustworthy. The world is filled with fragile promises and unreliable actors. But the person who consistently shoulders responsibility becomes someone others can depend on. Trust is the foundation of society, and it cannot exist without responsibility. Nations, too, are judged by whether they can be relied upon. India's ability to surprise the world was not simply technological, it was ethical. It demonstrated that it had the consistency to transform vision into reality. Others were stunned not just by weapons, but by the reliability of a system that could create them. Responsibility, therefore, is not merely practical but moral. It binds people together in trust and allows civilization itself to function. Without responsibility, nothing stable can exist. If you want to change your life, begin by asking yourself where you are refusing responsibility. That is the place of weakness, the hole in the armor, the crack in the foundation. If you ignore it, it will expand until it destroys you. But if you face it willingly and begin carrying the weight you have been avoiding, you will find that you grow stronger almost immediately. This is not theoretical, it is observable in every human life. People who take responsibility improve, even when the responsibility is small. A student who begins by cleaning his room discovers the capacity to organize his mind. A worker who decides to be punctual discovers competence. These small acts accumulate, and the accumulation becomes strength. Nations are built the same way, one responsible act at a time, multiplied across millions. That is how power emerges, quietly, steadily, through responsibility accepted everywhere. Even the concept of a weapon is itself tied to responsibility. A weapon is dangerous by definition, but its danger must be controlled. That control requires discipline, restraint, and judgment. A person who holds a sword but lacks responsibility is a threat to everyone, including himself. But a person who holds a sword responsibly is a protector. The same is true at the level of nations. Power without responsibility is tyranny, but power with responsibility is security. This is why the stunning effect of India's actions carried such weight. It was not simply that it possessed new tools, but that it demonstrated the maturity to wield them responsibly. Responsibility elevates raw capability into something meaningful and constructive. Without responsibility, power decays into destruction. With responsibility, power becomes civilization's shield. Order is not the natural state of existence. Chaos is. Left unattended, the world falls into disorder, entropy, and collapse. Every structure, every home, every nation must be built deliberately against the tide of chaos, or else it is consumed. This is why order is so precious. It is a victory wrestled from the jaws of chaos by discipline, vision, and persistence. A map of strength, secret or otherwise, is proof that order has been successfully established and maintained. India's weapons did not appear by accident. They are the consequence of institutions functioning, of plans being made and executed, of chaos being resisted daily. Order allows for continuity, for knowledge to accumulate and compound. Without order, there is no foundation on which strength can be built. The chaos of neglect destroys before strength has the chance to emerge. Consider your personal life. Every room left messy, every task avoided, every promise neglected. These are small manifestations of chaos. Left unchecked, they expand, and soon your life becomes unmanageable. Order, by contrast, begins with small, disciplined acts, tidying, scheduling, finishing what you start. These acts create structure, and structure builds stability. Stability allows you to aim higher, because you are no longer drowning in disorder. Nations work the same way. A society that cannot impose order on its own chaos collapses into corruption and inefficiency. A society that insists on order, however, creates the stability necessary for innovation and power. The secret map is evidence that order has been maintained across decades, allowing vision to transform into material strength. That is why chaos is always the enemy, and order always the path forward. Order is not tyranny, though people often confuse the two. Tyranny is rigid and lifeless, while order is dynamic and purposeful. True order allows for growth, because it creates a stable platform on which creativity can flourish. Imagine trying to build a skyscraper on shifting sand. It would fall before completion. But build on solid ground, and the structure can reach unimaginable heights. That is the gift of order. It creates the ground beneath your feet. Nations that foster order through functional systems, reliable governance, and consistent discipline create skyscrapers of strength. The weapons that astonish the world are skyscrapers of discipline, towers of order reaching into the strategic horizon. Without order, they would have been impossible. Chaos does not produce innovation. Chaos produces ruin. Only order sustains progress. Chaos, however, is always waiting. It lurks in the cracks, in the moments of negligence, in the temptation to cut corners. The universe tends toward disorder naturally, which means order must be fought for continually. That fight requires vigilance. An individual who becomes complacent about health or finances soon discovers chaos rushing in to claim what was neglected. A nation that ceases to care for discipline and order will be overtaken by corruption, inefficiency, and weakness. This is why order is not a one-time achievement, but a constant process. India's ability to maintain order across decades allowed it to reach the point where its strength could no longer be ignored. Each step, each decision, each system maintained, these were victories against chaos. Order is vigilance, and vigilance creates power. What does order look like in practical terms? It looks like routines followed consistently, systems maintained, and duties carried out without failure. In personal life, it means waking up at the same time, finishing tasks you commit to, and organizing your environment. In a nation, it means institutions that function reliably, engineers who meet their deadlines, scientists who continue research despite difficulties. These small, consistent actions accumulate, and their accumulation produces extraordinary results. A map of weapons is not built in a single leap, but through millions of ordered steps. Each success builds upon the last because order allows knowledge to compound. Chaos, by contrast, destroys progress, forcing you to start over endlessly. This is why order always triumphs in the long run. It preserves progress, so it can accumulate into power. There is also a psychological element to order. Human beings crave meaning, and meaning emerges when chaos is confronted and transformed into order. When you impose order on your life, you discover not only stability, but also purpose. Purpose is not found in distraction or indulgence. It is found in discipline and responsibility. A nation that discovers order also discovers meaning, and that meaning motivates its citizens to continue striving. Weapons, then, are not only symbols of physical order, but psychological ones. They signify that a people have found meaning in preparation, in sacrifice, and in building something lasting. America was stunned because it saw not just machines, but the order of a civilization manifesting its meaning in tangible form. Order and meaning are inseparable. Without order, meaning collapses. Order also allows for coordination. Individuals working chaotically achieve little, but when coordinated through shared order, they become formidable. A symphony is not merely a collection of instruments, it is order imposed upon sound, transforming noise into music. Likewise, a nation's strength is not the sum of individuals acting randomly, but the result of millions moving in ordered alignment. The secret map revealed not only technology, but coordination. The proof that institutions, industries, and people could move in concert. Coordination requires trust, and trust requires order. If chaos rules, cooperation collapses, because no one can rely on anyone else. But with order, reliability emerges, and reliability enables great collective achievements. That is why order is not merely personal but collective. It binds people together into something greater than themselves. The confrontation between order and chaos is ancient and archetypal. In mythology, the hero always descends into chaos to retrieve something of value, and then returns with it to the world of order. This narrative repeats endlessly because it reflects the structure of existence itself. Nations and individuals alike must enter chaos, confront uncertainty, and bring back new knowledge. But once the knowledge is found, it must be stabilized through order. Chaos may provide the raw material, but order shapes it into strength. India's weapons are the treasures retrieved from chaos and forged into form by order. The world was stunned not by chaos but by order, because order sustains what chaos only hints at. That is why chaos is dangerous, but order is powerful. The transformation from one into the other defines progress itself. Order requires courage because chaos is seductive. It whispers promises of freedom without discipline, comfort without effort, success without sacrifice. But these promises are lies. Chaos provides temporary relief but long-term collapse. Order, by contrast, demands sacrifice now in exchange for strength later. That is why it is harder but infinitely more rewarding. Individuals who resist the seduction of chaos grow stronger, and nations that resist corruption and disorder become resilient. India's capacity to resist chaos allowed it to surprise the world with its hidden strength. The weapons were less about steel and firepower, and more about discipline, consistency, and sacrifice accumulated over time. To choose order is to choose strength. To choose chaos is to choose destruction. That is the eternal truth, visible in every scale of existence. Order conquers chaos not once, but continually. It is a battle fought every day, in the smallest actions of an individual and the greatest strategies of a nation. A room cleaned today will be messy tomorrow unless effort is renewed. A project completed today will decay without maintenance. The same is true of nations and civilizations. They survive only through continual attention to order. India's hidden map is evidence that this battle has been fought repeatedly, and won often enough to accumulate into power. America's shock was less about the weapons themselves, and more about the revelation that a civilization had maintained order long enough to transform potential into undeniable strength. That is the true power of order. It not only conquers chaos but keeps it at bay, allowing growth to continue. Potential is a mysterious and limitless resource, hidden within every individual and every nation. It exists quietly, waiting to be discovered, but it does not manifest on its own. Potential requires vision, the ability to look beyond the immediate and see what could be. Without vision, potential decays into regret and missed opportunity. Vision, however, transforms possibility into direction, and direction turns into reality when combined with action. India's weapons were not simply machines of steel and fire. They were the visible form of potential realized through vision. What stunned America was not only the weapons themselves, but the recognition that an ancient civilization had taken its dormant potential and breathed life into it. Vision revealed what could be, and persistence made it real. Potential without vision is chaos, but potential with vision is power. You can see this truth reflected in your own life. Every human being is born with immense potential, talents waiting to be developed, skills waiting to be learned, ideas waiting to be pursued. But most people never fully realize what they could become. Why? Because they lack vision. They do not imagine themselves as capable of greatness, or they allow fear to blind them to possibility. Vision requires courage, because to imagine something greater is also to recognize how far you are from it now. That gap can feel unbearable, but those who dare to envision a higher possibility give themselves a target to aim at. A target transforms chaos into order because it channels energy into a specific path. Vision gives potential shape, and shape makes it actionable. Without vision, you are scattered. With vision, you are directed. Vision is always met with resistance, both internal and external. Internally, we doubt ourselves, fearing that we are not capable of what we dream. Externally, others resist because vision challenges the status quo. To announce a vision is to disturb complacency, to imply that things could be different, better, stronger. That disturbance provokes skepticism and opposition. Yet visionaries persist, not because the path is easy, but because the alternative is stagnation. India's vision of self-reliance and strength was not universally accepted at first. It was resisted, doubted, and mocked. But persistence transformed doubt into proof, and proof into reality. The weapons were not just tools of defense, but milestones on a visionary journey. They showed that the courage to imagine can, over time, reshape what is possible. Vision is the bridge between potential and reality, and it requires defiance of doubt. Potential is not limited to talent or resources. It extends to meaning. Meaning is discovered when potential is aimed at something greater than the self. A life lived only for personal gratification squanders potential because it lacks higher vision. But a life oriented toward responsibility, service, and contribution channels potential into something enduring. Nations face the same choice. They can squander potential in corruption, division, and short-sighted comfort, or they can aim it at vision that transcends the present moment. India's map was evidence of a vision aimed not only at defense, but at sovereignty, independence, and long-term stability. Potential used for trivial purposes vanishes, but potential harnessed for meaningful vision echoes across generations. Meaning sustains the difficult work of transformation because it reminds you why the sacrifice is worth it. Vision without meaning collapses. Vision with meaning inspires. The process of turning potential into reality through vision is gradual and often invisible. Progress rarely comes in sudden bursts. It comes in small, consistent steps that accumulate over time. Each experiment, each test, each adjustment brings you closer to realization. From the outside, it may look like nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, potential is being shaped by vision and persistence. Then, suddenly, there is a breakthrough, and the world is shocked by what appears to be overnight success. But there is no overnight success, only the visible tip of years of hidden work. India's weapons were not sudden miracles. They were the outcome of long, hidden processes of vision and labor. What stunned the world was the revelation of decades of unseen effort. Potential becomes reality slowly, then suddenly, because vision sustains the invisible work required. Vision also requires sacrifice, because to pursue one path is to abandon others. When you commit to a vision, you close doors to alternative futures. That narrowing of possibility is frightening but necessary. A person who refuses to choose remains scattered, wasting potential in endless indecision. A nation that refuses to choose a vision remains vulnerable, swayed by the whims of others. To pursue a vision of strength, India had to sacrifice other comforts, redirecting resources toward research, discipline, and strategy. That sacrifice was costly, but it transformed possibility into power. In your life, the same principle holds. Without sacrifice, vision remains fantasy. With sacrifice, vision becomes reality. Potential demands a price, and vision pays it willingly. That is why sacrifice is not loss, but investment, the cost of turning possibility into something tangible. There is an archetypal quality to vision, because it requires seeing what others cannot yet see. The visionary plays the role of the hero who steps into the unknown, confronts uncertainty, and brings back something of value. This journey is never easy, because it demands facing dragons of chaos, fear, doubt, and resistance. But on the other side of that confrontation lies transformation. Nations that dare to envision greatness walk this heroic path collectively, taking risks in the face of uncertainty. India's vision required stepping into uncharted territory, risking failure and enduring criticism. Yet it persevered, and what emerged was not just weapons, but a new perception of what was possible. That is the heroic nature of vision. It turns fear into courage, doubt into faith, and chaos into order. Potential becomes reality only through the heroic pursuit of vision. Vision is contagious. When one person dares to imagine something greater, others begin to believe it is possible. When a nation demonstrates the reality of its vision, other nations take notice, and the collective imagination shifts. America was stunned not only because of what India achieved, but because it forced a recalibration of global imagination. If India could transform its potential through vision, then the boundaries of possibility shifted for everyone watching. This is why vision is so powerful. It does not stop with the visionary, but inspires others to awaken their own potential. In your personal life, when you pursue your vision, you inspire others around you to do the same. Vision multiplies itself by example. Potential realized through vision becomes a beacon, and a beacon guides not only the one who lit it, but all who see it shining. The danger, of course, is to live without vision. A person without vision drifts aimlessly, wasting potential on trivialities and distractions. A nation without vision fragments into chaos, its potential consumed by corruption, division, and decay. Vision is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Without it, potential rots. With it, potential transforms into greatness. That is why vision must be cultivated deliberately, through reflection, courage, and commitment. India's map of weapons was more than a strategic development. It was a statement of vision. It said, "We will not remain passive, we will not squander our potential, we will shape it into power." That declaration stunned the world because it revealed what is possible when vision guides effort. Vision is the compass that turns potential into reality, and reality into legacy. Strength, when understood properly, is never just about intimidation. To intimidate is to impose fear, but fear is fragile, and it collapses the moment a greater force arises. True strength goes beyond fear. It inspires. It shows others what is possible when discipline, vision, and responsibility converge. A weapon, in this sense, is not simply a tool of destruction, but a symbol of capacity, resilience, and mastery. When America was stunned by India's display, it was not only because of the raw power of those weapons, but because of what they represented. The arrival of a civilization stepping into its full stature. True strength inspires by demonstrating that greatness is attainable, that potential can be realized, and that responsibility can be shouldered successfully. Inspiration lasts, intimidation fades. To intimidate is easy. Anyone with brute force can create fear in the short term. But to inspire is profoundly difficult because it requires strength rooted in authenticity, discipline, and moral clarity. Inspiration invites admiration rather than resentment. It calls others not just to cower, but to rise themselves. India's actions did not simply generate fear, they commanded respect. Respect is the foundation of lasting strength, because it changes how others view you in the long term. Fear provokes resistance, but respect fosters recognition. When strength is genuine, when it arises from sustained responsibility and vision, it cannot be dismissed as a temporary phenomenon. It stands as a beacon, reminding others of what is possible when chaos is conquered and order prevails. Inspiration makes strength sustainable. The difference between intimidation and inspiration can be seen in the response it produces. Intimidation drives people to shrink, to hide, or to resist out of bitterness. Inspiration, on the other hand, calls people to elevate themselves. When a person sees true strength, they think, if such transformation is possible for them, it may also be possible for me. That thought sparks courage instead of resentment. At the level of nations, this is transformative. India's display showed the world that long-term responsibility, discipline, and vision can generate strength even in the face of skepticism. For individuals, the principle is the same. When you cultivate true strength, you inspire others to take responsibility themselves. That ripple effect is far more powerful than any temporary intimidation. Strength that inspires carries a moral component. It is not only about what you can do, but about what you choose to do with that power. Raw strength without restraint becomes tyranny, but strength governed by responsibility becomes protection. This is why genuine power is always tied to ethical responsibility. A strong person who refuses to exploit their power is admirable. A strong nation that wields power with restraint earns legitimacy. India's weapons were not revealed as instruments of aggression, but as proof of sovereignty, self-reliance, and maturity. This is what elevated them from tools of intimidation to symbols of inspiration. The world recognized not just capacity, but responsibility. Strength, when combined with responsibility, produces not fear but respect. And respect is the highest form of influence. Inspiration also creates unity. When strength is authentic, it binds people together under a shared sense of pride and purpose. Citizens who see their nation rise through discipline and sacrifice feel part of something larger than themselves. They are inspired to contribute more, to work harder, to uphold the standards that created the strength in the first place. Intimidation, by contrast, divides. It isolates those in power from those who feel threatened, creating resentment within and without. Inspiration unites because it offers a vision of collective greatness. India's rise was not only a geopolitical event, it was a psychological one. It reminded millions of people within its borders, and beyond that disciplined effort can lead to astonishing results. That unity is a far more powerful force than fear could ever produce. At the individual level, the same truth applies. If you pursue strength solely to intimidate others, you will find yourself alone, resented, and ultimately vulnerable. But if you cultivate strength to inspire, to protect, to uplift, to demonstrate what is possible, you will find others drawn to you. They will admire your resilience, your consistency, your courage, and they will wish to emulate it. That emulation multiplies your impact beyond your own actions. Your strength becomes a model, and a model shapes generations. Intimidation dies when the intimidator falls, but inspiration lives on long after the inspirer is gone. That is why true strength is not measured in how much fear you create, but in how many lives you elevate. Inspiration outlives the individual, intimidation dies with them. The paradox of strength is that those who wield it most responsibly often inspire the most deeply. People instinctively recognize authenticity. They know when power has been earned through sacrifice, persistence, and discipline. They also know when it is shallow, inflated, or abused. India's hidden map symbolized strength that had been earned over decades, quietly and persistently. That kind of strength cannot be ignored because it carries authenticity. Authenticity inspires because it proves that the path is real, not an illusion. Others can follow it, replicate it, and build upon it. The same applies to your life. If your strength comes from genuine effort, people will recognize it as real. They will be moved by it, and in being moved, they will be inspired to undertake their own path of responsibility. Inspiration also changes perception. When a nation displays authentic strength, others no longer see it as weak or dependent. They see it as capable, sovereign, and worthy of respect. When a person demonstrates strength of character, others stop dismissing them and begin to take them seriously. Perception is power in itself, because how others view you shapes how they interact with you. Intimidation may alter perception temporarily, but it breeds suspicion and fear. Inspiration alters perception permanently, because it breeds respect and admiration. India's strength changed how the world perceived it, not merely as a developing power, but as a capable force with vision and responsibility. That transformation in perception was as significant as the weapons themselves. True strength does not just change what you can do, it changes how you are seen. Strength that inspires is always forward, looking. It does not rest on what has been achieved, but continually asks what is possible next. Inspiration generates momentum because it awakens imagination. Once people see what is possible, they begin to believe in more. A person who lifts themselves out of weakness inspires others to do the same, and suddenly entire communities begin to rise. A nation that demonstrates its strength through discipline inspires others to believe that sovereignty and progress are possible even in difficult circumstances. This forward-looking inspiration is contagious. It spreads across borders and generations. That is why India's actions were more than strategic. They were symbolic. They symbolized the possibility of transformation, and in doing so, they shifted the imagination of millions worldwide. The ultimate measure of strength is not whether it frightens your enemies, but whether it inspires your allies, your people, and even your critics. Fear is short-lived, admiration is enduring. Intimidation compels compliance, but inspiration compels respect. Respect is far more stable because it is freely given, not coerced. True strength creates admiration, and admiration reshapes the world far more deeply than fear ever could. India's weapons stunned the world because they were not only intimidating, but inspiring. They represented the culmination of vision, discipline, and responsibility. And they signaled that strength had matured into something more profound. True strength is never about domination. It is about demonstration. It demonstrates what is possible, and in doing so, calls the rest of the world to rise.